you can't do something. You got a dream, you got to protect it. People can't do something themselves. They want to tell you you can't do it. You want something, go get it. Period.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's another Monday here on 12 Ounce Sports with the JD Sports Show. Good afternoon to all of you listening. Is definitely been a crazy week since we last talked here on the JD Sports Show. Oh my goodness, do we have a lot to talk about today here? Uh, I almost don't even know where to start. There's so much to discuss. You know, I said last week on the show before we left the air, I was hoping that we would start this week with some more positive news. But every time I've done a show so far, it's been great, but it's been starting out with kind of the negative side of things. But that's because, once again, we have some very big news to discuss here on the JD Sports Show here on 12 Ounce. Thank you for tuning in again here on the JD Sports Show every Monday, 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern on 12 Ounce Sports. Thank you to the Fields Golf Course and MyBookie, our sponsors. And thank you to the official theme song of the JD Sports Show. You heard it before coming on the air, and we always play it going off the air. That would be Odyssey by Scorch featuring Austin Tenick. You can go over to SoundCloud now and search Scorch for more songs like Odyssey, which is the official theme song of the JD Sports Show. Thank you to Odyssey and Austin Tenick for allowing us to play their song here on the JD Sports Show every Monday on 12 Ounce Sports. And thank you again for tuning in. We have a lot to talk about. And it has been, I have been so closely monitoring my phone the last 24 hours because it has been back and forth. It's almost hard to know what is true right now as we sit at 2:04 p.m. Eastern Time on August 10th and what is not. So let's kind of give you the timeline of events here of what I'm going to talk about. And what I'm going to talk about is the biggest story going on right now, and that's college football. So let's get some facts and unknown fact. We know that the MAC, the Mid-American Conference, has canceled fall sports. They have already voted. They have decided it is official. The Mid-American Conference, they've had their president speak, is canceling fall sports for 2020. We know that for a fact. But we have absolutely no idea what is going on with the Big Ten, ACC, SEC, Big 12. About 3 hours ago, the Detroit Free Press, along with a lot of other news outlets, said the Big Ten's canceled their season. It's over. And as we sit right now at 2:05 p.m. Eastern, that has been debunked. And it has been proven by several media outlets and news sources that that is not true, that they have not officially voted. And now I have seen a tweet just before I came on the air, just 5 minutes before I came on the air today, that the Big Ten is going to have a meeting tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern to vote. So we thought they had a vote that they canceled, and then that turned out to not be true. And now they actually are going to have another meeting tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern, so about 4 hours from this time that I'm saying this, to apparently officially determine. There are some people, it depends what side you're on. Apparently there are some people who are saying that, and I'm not sitting here trying to spread lies or rumors, but there are some people who are wondering, what if they're revoting because of the backlash they received, or did they actually really vote, and did the reports that came out, were they actually true or not? So we have no idea. We do know the Big Ten is voting tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And apparently that vote that happens at 6 p.m. Eastern tonight is supposedly the vote that we need to be waiting for, because that's going to be the vote to determine if the Big Ten is going to play this year or not. Now, it sounds like the SEC is going to play. It just, from everything I've seen, unless something drastic changes, which I think maybe if the Big Ten does officially cancel, it could sway that. But I think SEC is going to do everything they can. Of course, it's going to be difficult. Now, the good news is a lot of these conferences were planning to do conference-only games anyways. So, if the Big Ten cancels, it doesn't really affect the SEC all that much. But if the SEC is the only conference playing, I have no idea what they're going to do for like bowl games or champion. I mean, you just play each other again. I'm not sure. So there's a lot going on. The ACC also sounds like they're more on the side of playing, and it sounds like the Big 12 is kind of leaning more towards with the Big 10 in saying no. So the Big 10 and Big 12 are kind of leaning towards no. ACC and SEC are leaning towards yes. So, I don't know. In my opinion, I would like to just. It's just weird to me. I think the weirdest thing about all this is the Big Ten, if they really did want to cancel, why in the world did you announce a schedule a week ago? And I really don't believe, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think much has changed in a week. It hasn't, the virus, COVID-19, hasn't gotten any better, and it hasn't really gotten any worse. It's been pretty much the same from a week ago when you announced the 2020 schedules for your conference. So what happened between now and a week that became so drastic? Now, I'm not going to sit here, because I don't want to get too political on if I believe it's right or wrong necessarily, right? If I believe it's right or wrong for college to play. I don't really want to get on that fence. I'm more on the stand right now as far as this concerns of why would they release a schedule last week. I don't understand why the Big Ten released a schedule last week if this week they're going to just cancel the season. That just doesn't make any sense to me, because it's not like we've had some new development within the last week that has told us there's no way college football can work. I thought when the schedule came out, that was my indication to me that they were going to do everything they could to play college football, because I felt like they weren't going to release a schedule. They weren't going to sit there and build an entire schedule if they didn't feel like college football could happen. So when they did that, I thought, okay, they feel like college football can happen. And obviously I knew, like, right, if a team had a big outbreak or something between now and September happened, they could cancel. But I figured we would at least get to that point before. Nothing really has happened in the last week between the schedule getting announced and today that would warrant this cancellation that the Big Ten is discussing. Believe it or not, Jim Harbaugh came out with a schedule, kind of came out with a statement today, and I don't want to read all of it. I'll just read a little bit of it. And he his message was so powerful that I've even seen Ohio State fans, which I never in my life, by the way, would have thought Ohio State fans would agree with Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh was so on point, apparently, to many fans and players and coaches that even Ohio State fans in the comments have agreed with what Jim Harbaugh said. I'll just read a little bit of you to what I think is the important parts. Again, Jim Harbaugh addressing his thoughts about the Big Ten possibly being canceled. So this is just some quotes from what he said earlier today. I would like to address the rumors that are swirling today. I'm not advocating for football this fall because of my passion or our players' desire to play, but because of the facts accumulated over the last 8 weeks since our players returned to campus on June 13th. So he's basically, and that was really the big chunk of that statement, the biggest, kind of the most important part of that statement. And basically what he's saying there, to paraphrase, is, he's not going to sit here and say, I want football because I like football, right? He's not saying, I want to play football because that's my life. He's saying we should play football because of what has happened over these last 8 weeks. He believes that they put in protocols in place, at least in Michigan, at the University of Michigan, he believes they've put in protocols that are good enough, or not, I shouldn't say good enough, but are at the point where he believes players can safely play college football this fall. So he's saying, I'm not saying I want to play football because of my passion for football. I'm saying I want to play football because he believes we can safely play college football. What he has seen over the last 8 weeks, which is basically camps and college players coming back and workouts and things like that, he believes that what they have structured in place is good enough and safe enough for players to play. There's also been a huge Twitter movement with college players using the hashtag #WeWantToPlay, and then a little bit after that, then coaches have jumped in with the hashtag #WeWantToCoach. So what I've gathered from everything over the last 24 hours or so, which has been nuts with this story, is that players and coaches, for the most part, I would say probably a very vast majority, feel safe enough to play college football this fall. And when Jim Harbaugh, who I believe, and you can call me biased if you want, I believe does what's best for his players. There's been many cases where we have heard he has advocated for players and player safeties ahead of everything else. And so when a guy like Jim Harbaugh, who is very, to be honest, he's a political guy. He's made it very clear he sides politically to one side. So when this guy is saying, when Jim Harbaugh is sitting out there and sending out a statement to the world, because, well, Jim Harbaugh, one of the things I love about Jim Harbaugh is he says stuff and he knows he's going to get backlash, but if he believes it's right, he's going to say it. I love that about him. Whether you believe it's right or not, whether I believe it's right or not, the man is so true to himself and so true and so visible and he's so... I feel like that's why I would want to play for him, because he doesn't seem to really hide anything. He will outspokenly say things, right or wrong, that he feels about. He's done that all his career, not even just at Michigan, but with the 49ers and at Stanford. He's always kind of been that way. He's always been an outspoken person. Excuse me. And so when he's sitting here saying that he believes truly that the protocols they have put in place at the University of Michigan, that he believes they can safely play college football in the fall, that tells me that they feel good enough to play college football. And the thing that's aggravating about everything about this is it's not the people voting are not playing. They're not coaching. That's what's frustrating to me, and I'm sure it's got to be so frustrating to those young men and those young women who are coaching and playing, because they don't really get a say in this vote, and they're the ones that have to endure the possibilities and the risk, right? In my opinion, the players and coaches should be the ones voting, because they're the ones that at the end of the day are going to be risking themselves, if they feel like that, to play college football. These presidents who are voting have nothing to do with what is happening in between those lines, and every week and every day they risk themselves. They have nothing to do with it. So, to me, I feel like this is where the NCAA drives me nuts. They are so, it feels like the NCAA is so against listening to their athletes. It has been that way forever. It is why the NCAA gets so much criticism, because it feels so frustrating when they don't listen to their own athletes, the people who are actually going to play. I'm not saying you have to listen to them on Twitter. I'm saying let them vote. Even if you just want to take it into consideration, even if you just let the players and coaches vote and you don't say that that's the decision, but you can at least take it into consideration. I would say if I'm the NCAA and I see that a vast majority, I mean 90% plus of players and coaches want to play after I do a vote, I would say, okay, you know what? Let's give them the option like every other professional sport. If you want to opt out, go ahead. You don't have to play. But if you guys want to go and risk it, go and play. We've already made it to conference only, so that already eliminates a ton of travel. And the way they did the scheduling, at least for Big Ten, and I'm sure other conferences will as well, is they limited travel as much as possible. So they tried to do road games that were at least relatively close. They didn't want a lot of travel. Which is right out the gate, to me, a huge, okay, that's already big, because that means you're limiting travel, which is what MLB did. I mean, Major League Baseball essentially did the same thing with having to play your own division for 40 games and a very close range division for 20 games. So we've kind of already seen that implemented in Major League Baseball. And the bubble, actually, I'll get to that later because that's a whole different story. So continuing on about this, it's just, man, it feels like there are and I think every player should be given the right here. I think if a player wants to play, let them play. If they don't want to play, let them opt out. But it just feels like there are so many players who are willing to play that I think the problem, and here's the problem, and this is where, to play devil's advocate, this is where the flip side of that is. So kind of thinking along the lines of NCAA, and whether you believe this is right or wrong, this is what the NCAA's mindset is. Well, if that kid dies, we're screwed. If he dies from COVID-19, we're screwed because he's an amateur. He's not signed to a contract. He doesn't have, the NCAA is essentially liable for something really bad happens to these kids. And I'm no lawyer, I'm no law expert. I have no idea if some way, somehow, athletes and coaches could sign some sort of waiver for this year. I don't know if that's truly allowed. I haven't dug into that much enough. I would think if that was possible, it probably already would have happened. I would think that would already be implemented. But if it hasn't, I feel like that would be maybe the best way to go. Like have a system where these athletes and coaches can sign some sort of waiver that, they are not liable for any COVID-related injury. Obviously, on-the-field injury and off-field injury is different, but COVID-related. Joe Burrow, the number one pick in last year's draft, national champion, Heisman winner at LSU, tweeted this: "I feel for all college athletes right now. I hope their voices are heard by the decision makers. If this happened a year ago, I may be looking for a job right now." That's some strong words from the reigning Heisman winner, the reigning quarterback of the national champion LSU Tigers, to sit there and say, I may not be a quarterback in the NFL if it wasn't. And he's right, because remember, last year is when Joe Burrow became Joe Burrow. I mean, he was a backup at Ohio State, and he didn't get his chance until LSU, so he may not be with the Cincinnati Bengals, or may not have had, as he said, a job right now if it wasn't for college football. So, and I think that's another thing that's kind of getting lost in everything, is not a lot, I don't know if I want to say a lot, but there's a good portion of these kids who would like to believe, or are going to have a chance at the next level at the NFL. And there is going to be, every year there's Joe Burrow type players, right, where they just explode and they suddenly become a high draft pick. So if there's a guy who's like a third or fourth rounder right now, who, I'm sure he would be fine being a third or fourth rounder. I think most people would. But what if he went out there and had a Joe Burrow type season? Because like Joe Burrow said, believe it or not, Joe Burrow before last year was prototyped at like a 5th to 6th round pick. And he became the first overall pick. I mean, 1 year can make a huge difference for a player in any sport to kind of come out of their shell and explode to being a top prospect. And so, there's a lot of those guys out there right now who are third, fourth, fifth round picks who are kind of saying, well, I guess I'm going to be a third, fourth round pick because I didn't get to play my senior season, right? I didn't get that last chance at saying, hey, I want to, be the star. And I know there's so much. I mean, I'm kind of just scratching the surface. I understand it's a lot more complicated and deeper than what I'm saying for the NCAA. I get that. But I also feel like they're making it a little bit more complicated and complex than it needs to be. Trevor Lawrence, who is obviously one of the best college football players right now, he is, arguably going to be the number one pick in next year's NFL draft, regardless of what happens this season or not. If they play or not, I should say. He went off on a Twitter tangent the other night about why college athletes should play, and or why they should play football. And I think he made some good points. I think there are some things in there where I was kind of like, well, but it just the reason I bring that up is it's just there's such a big movement right now. As I mentioned, the hashtag We Want to Play and We Want to Coach happening on Twitter. It's big right now, man. There are so many people out there, athletes and coaches, who want the season. And I think that statement that I read earlier by Jim Harbaugh was big because that's a huge coach in a big program speaking about why he feels they have protocols that are well enough in place and safe enough to play college football. That's big to me. So I don't know. Again, the college it was reported that Big Ten was canceled, then that was debunked, and now within the last 30 minutes or so, there's a report that they are going to vote at 6 p.m. Eastern tonight. The Big Ten will vote whether to play college football this fall or not. Again, I just am confused the fact that they came out with a schedule last week, and now a week later, they suddenly want to cancel the season with no big real developments between then and then, right? I'm not saying that COVID, I'm not trying to get political in the fact that I think COVID's gotten better or worse. It really, but there's not been some big development in the COVID situation that within this last week that I would say, yes, that warrants a cancellation. The problem is, I think the other side of this is, again, these are amateur players. This is not professionals, right? These are college, young 18 to 22, 23-year-old guys and gals who essentially are, a lot of these kids feel they have a future at the next level. So, there's a lot at stake for them. There's a lot at stake for these young athletes to want to play this year and not have cancellation or postponement. They want to play now because if they did play in spring, I would be willing to. I was talking this with a buddy. We were talking about what if it does get pushed back to spring. I really don't think a lot of the top athletes would play in spring because at that point you're preparing for the NFL. If you're an athlete, a Justin Fields, a Trevor Lawrence, who feels like you're going to be a top 5 pick, I don't think you're going to play spring college football because, first of all, if you get any sort of injury, you're in trouble because you're playing in spring, which means you're coming up on the NFL draft. We're not just talking about a lengthy injury. Even if you just get like a couple month injury, that's a huge problem. And that's the time that normally those athletes are preparing for the NFL, not playing college football. So I think even if they did delay it to spring, I think you would lose a lot of your top players because they would probably opt out and just prepare them. Because look, if you're first, second, third, fourth round pick, you're probably not going to play in the spring because you don't want to risk getting hurt or having something happen. I just think it's either going to be, to me, I feel like you've either got to cancel it outright or you play. I don't think moving into spring does anything in the fact that you might lose a lot of big players. Now, the MAC, I know, had discussed wanting to try again in the spring. Maybe they will. Obviously, sports, smaller sports, I think would be more willing to. But in football's case, especially big players in football, wanting to get ready for the NFL, they may not be more willing to. But a smaller sport or a sport that maybe you're just doing because you enjoy it, I think those athletes would probably be okay with that because they just wanted to play. or you're basing it off your scholarship or whatever. But you're talking about just specifically about football. That's what I'm talking about. Boy, just it's a big mess right now. 1 minute I hear or see a report that says canceled. The next minute it was no, it's not canceled. So, like I said, even 5 minutes before I came on here, there was people just still discussing it. I just had seen the tweet that there's going to be a meeting between the Big Ten presidents at 6 p.m. Eastern tonight to discuss the season. Man, it's going to be the last 24 hours have been very crazy in the sports world, especially with college football specifically. But even more so now, I think these next 24 hours might be even crazier, especially if the Big Ten does truly decide to cancel. Because I've seen Ohio State coaches and players say look, the SEC basically said they would welcome other conferences to come down and play. And I'm telling you right now, an Ohio State team probably is one of the few teams, Ohio State, Penn State, maybe Michigan, from the Big Ten that I think could go down and play in the SEC and have a chance to be competitive against some of their top teams. So it'll be interesting to see if they do cancel the Big Ten season, would some of these Big Ten teams, Ohio State, Penn State, maybe Wisconsin, maybe Michigan, be willing to go down to SEC or the ACC if they both play and play against their conferences. Of course, that would mean a lot more travel unless they sort of set up some sort of bubble down there for those teams. But I really believe, as of right now, the SEC and ACC will play. I think if Big Ten cancels, it changes that a little bit. I think then maybe you're looking at more of a cancellation because once one domino falls, the rest of them usually do. So we'll see. That kind of brings me to the other aspect of the NBA bubble and the NHL bubble are both working brilliantly. I just saw another tweet that came out that again, for the third week in a row, no positive test in the NHL. The bubble is working. The NBA has not had any issues with it either. The problem is you can't do that in college because it's an amateur sport and you can't basically put college athletes in a situation without some kind of compensatory pay. But I think NFL should probably look at some sort of a bubble system or very close plays because of the fact that it is working so well with the NBA and NHL. I honestly, when I first heard about everybody's kind of comeback to play, I thought the NHL and NBA had the best strategies with the bubble. I felt like that was going to probably work best because of you're keeping everybody there, nobody's coming in, nobody's coming out, and you're just kind of retesting and replaying. With MLB, I always kind of felt kind of iffy about that because and now they've tightened up their protocols a lot more, thankfully, because at first their protocols were too loose, which is what created the outbreak with the Marlins and the Cardinals. Is they had way too loose of protocols, talking about Major League Baseball. But I really always liked the NHL and NBA bubble system. I always felt like when I first heard about how all these professional sports were going to go about things, it felt like to me the most realistic for a successful full season was going to be some sort of a bubble. And it has proven out to be that's the case. NHL and NBA have been killing it with that. They're going to probably be able to finish their seasons without any problems. I think MLB will be okay now that they've tightened their protocols. It shouldn't have taken this long for Major League Baseball. It's a little ridiculous that we got to have a couple of outbreaks before Major League Baseball decided to tighten up their protocols. No surprise, as I've mentioned, I'm not a big fan of Manfred and the top tier group of Major League Baseball. I think NFL, if I'm Roger Goodell in the NFL, I think I would highly consider trying to figure out some sort of a bubble system because it is working well. NHL and NBA have been doing great with it. I think the bubble is the way to go if you're going to do it. If professionally, you can't do it amateurly with college. But, I just saw a tweet from Matt Hayes, who is a senior writer for Bleacher Report, college football for Bleacher Report. And he said, a Power 5 AD just texted me, quote, it's looking more like it's Big Ten and Pac-12, which, again, Pac-12 was one of the first teams to kind of unionize and say that they didn't want to play unless all these criteria were met, versus SEC, ACC, and Big 12, which is what I basically said. Big Ten and Pac-12 were leaning more towards no play. Big 12 was, I think, at least what I've seen, leaning a little bit more towards no. And SEC and ACC were leaning more towards, yes, we want to play. It's going to be awfully crazy, folks. Hang on to these next 24 hours. Keep your phones close. Keep your TVs turned on. There's going to be some big news, especially around 6 p.m. Eastern when the Big Ten presidents meet again to officially decide. Take a break to thank our sponsors. All right, thanks to the Fields Golf Course. Make sure to visit their website, thefieldsgolfcourse.com, now to book a tee time and for future availabilities. That's thefieldsgolfcourse.com, located in Ithaca, Michigan. Just want to take a moment to tell you all about 12 Ounce Sports. Now that the action is officially back on, 12 Ounce Sports is your home for the best live talk shows covering all aspects of the sporting world and live game broadcasts. With Zingo TV adding 12 Ounce Sports to their long list of channels, you can now catch my show on the JD Sports Show and all the others on Zingo TV channel 761. All you got to do is download Zingo TV and use the promo code 120Z, it's 12 ounce, when signing up. It's that simple. Be sure to check out our latest blogs and podcasts as well on 12ouncesportsradio.com. Sports are in full swing, and I want to help you take advantage of those sports investments when getting in on the action. 12 Ounce Sports has officially partnered with MyBookie.ag to get you the best deal possible when you sign up on MyBookie.ag. They'll match your first deposit up to $1,000 when you punch in the promo code 12 Ounce Sports. That's 12 Ounce Sports when signing up on MyBookie to get your deposit match up to $1,000. And again, thanks to our official theme song, the JD Sports Show, Odyssey by Scorch, featuring Austin Tenick. You can find that song and all the other songs by Scorch on SoundCloud.com. A 30-minute rant about the college. I'm honestly surprised it was only 30 minutes, as much as I've been thinking about over the last couple of hours. And so it's... I wish I had a show tomorrow too, because it is going to be really crazy again over these next 24 hours, especially with what happens with the Big Ten. Just imagine if the Big Ten votes tonight and they say, no, we do want to play. Then those people who said that they did another vote because of the backlash would probably, I think there would be even more backlash against the Big Ten if they re-voted and I don't know. It's going to be a lot to look at and think about. Again, keep your phones close, keep your TVs turned on sports channels. There's going to be a lot going on in the sports world over the next, especially few hours. But, all this movement stuff that we want to play and we want to coach, it was literally happening overnight. It was so crazy how this movement became a thing overnight. Just wild how all this has happened over the last couple of days. It really started with when the Mid-American Conference officially canceled, that all these other athletes started to go, oh no, this might actually get canceled, and then they wanted to speak up about it as well. So we'll see. Again, I think what happens with the Big Ten tonight is really going to have a big play on what other conferences do. I think maybe not quite as much on the SEC and ACC, because they seem to feel really determined to play, but I feel like if they cancel, their presidents might go, well, we have to cancel too. I don't know. We'll see what happens tonight with the Big Ten meeting. Again, at 6 p.m. Eastern time, their Big Ten presidents are scheduled to have a meeting on determine and to vote on the 2020 season. We will see. It's going to be pretty crazy. Let's switch gears to Major League Baseball now. I want to talk about first of all, the Detroit Tigers, ladies and gentlemen. The Detroit Tigers, the team that were the worst team in baseball in 2020 or 2019, are in the playoffs. Remember, 16 teams this year will make the playoffs. 8 teams, the 2 top teams in each conference, and then 2 wild card teams. The Detroit Tigers are second in the American League Central, 8-5. They are in the playoffs, and 8-5 is pretty good. They have a better record than the Houston Astros, who I predicted would go to the World Series this year. Which, by the way, we're going to talk about the Astros, what happened yesterday in just a moment. I tweeted yesterday that I was going to make the case that the Detroit Tigers were going to make the playoffs this year, and I expected people to go, wait, is he just joking or is he just kidding? No, I'm serious. We've watched now about 2 weeks of baseball, and one thing I have learned is that this Detroit Tiger team does not have great starting pitching, but they have a pretty good bullpen, and they have what is so important to win games, especially down in the postseason, timely hitting. Something they did not have the last couple of years. They probably don't win any or many 2-1 games over the last couple of years, but they did yesterday. They won a 2-1 game with the Pittsburgh Pirates yesterday, and yeah, I know the Pittsburgh Pirates aren't good. They're 3-13. They're one of the worst teams in baseball. I get that. But even then, last year, they would not have won 2 games. Or games that would finish 2-1. They would not have been on the winning side of that. And what's crazy to me, and the reason I am making the case for why I believe the Detroit Tigers will make the playoffs this year, one, the expanded playoffs are huge. Because, again, the new rule, the top 2 teams in each division and 2 wildcard teams get in. I believe the Tigers will withstand a 60-game season enough. I'm not sure they're going to be one of the top 2 teams, but they're going to get in somehow, some way. The Tigers will make the playoffs this year. Reasons to back that up. So here we go. One, their starting pitching has already been horrendous. Only can go up from here. Matthew Boyd, who was their ace last year, has been really bad. He has not been the Matthew Boyd of 2019 or 2018. And that has got to scare teams because they are still in the playoffs without their best pitcher pitching well. Once Matthew Boyd figures things out, once Michael Fulmer gets more comfortable pitching again, Daniel Norris gets back in pitching again, Spencer Turnbull has looked really good. Ivan Nova, he's a solid 5th starter. You just need him to win a couple of games here or there. They will continue to win. And that bullpen, ladies and gentlemen, the Detroit Tigers have a good bullpen for the first time since I've been born in 1994. They have a good bullpen. Now, Joe Jimenez has been a little rocky, but, when his stuff is on, dude, that fastball and that slider mix that he has is good. High 90s, fastball coming in at your hands, and then a slider away to eat you up. That is what I'm talking about. Buck Farmer has suddenly become a reliable 8th-inning guy. Yeah, I don't know if I would still fully trust Buck Farmer with a game in the 8th, but again, he's become much more reliable this year. And then there's this young man who has become a phenom in the back of that bullpen named Gregory Soto. For the last couple of years was a starter, throwing 94, 95, maybe 93, was getting pounded as a starter. Did not look good for the young man who was doing really well down in the minor leagues. So what do? They change up his stance a little bit. They give a little bit less of a leg kick up, and they put him to the bullpen. And now the dude's throwing 99, 100 gas by guys. And Gregory Soto, I think, eventually should become and will become the 8th-inning guy. And then you're going to have to face guys that can throw 98-plus back-to-back innings. Soto has become, I would say, maybe the best bullpen reliever for the Tigers. He's been a huge blessing in disguise. Jose Siniero, I think he's okay. I think when you need a day here or there to get an inning or two, Siniero will get that done. Kyle Funkhauser, I think he's got a lot of upside. I think once he continues to feel what it's like out of a bullpen, the dude's been a starter basically his whole life. You got to give him a little bit of time in the bullpen. I think once he continues to feel out the bullpen, I think Kyle Funkhauser is going to be a lot better. And he has been of late, but I think he's going to continue to get better as a bullpen guy, Kyle Funkhauser. I like that bullpen. I really do. I think it's a bullpen that can help them win close games, and yesterday proved it. Yesterday proved they can still win 2-1 games. And then the timely hitting. Oh, it's beautiful. It is so beautiful how they timely hit. They were stinking it up yesterday. They were down 1-0. Victor Reyes gets his first extra base hit against a National League team in his career. Timely. Then Austin Romine, who has become a real nice pickup for the Tigers, comes out of nowhere and just been racking it up this year. He hits a single up the middle. It's 1-1. They didn't do nothing all the rest of the game than that. Then, in the top of the ninth, Jonathan Schoop gets on. The dude throws a pitch. It looked like Dr. Fauci's first pitch, and again with the Nationals, that almost went over the netting. It was so high to the right. Jonathan Schoop gets up to second. And the best hitter in Detroit Tiger history since the great Al Kaline steps in the box, named Miguel Cabrera. And Miggy steps in that box. Mr. Clutch himself, Mr. Triple Crown Miguel Cabrera. And what's that dude do? He does what he's been doing his whole life, clutch city. Single, left side between the shortstop and third baseman, and boom, 2-1 Tigers in the ninth inning. Clutch hitting time and time again for the Detroit Tigers and clutch bullpen. The starters are going to figure things out. They have not even been at their best yet, and they're still in the playoffs, still 8-5. They're only going to get better. Boyd's going to figure things out. Fulmer's going to be throwing fire again. He's going to be back to that Rookie of the Year form again. And the Detroit Tigers, mark my words, the 2020 Tigers are going to make the playoffs this year. I'm telling you. I'm telling you, the Tigers are going to make the playoffs this year, guys. There's just, if this was a 162 season, I would probably be a little hesitant. I would. But in a 60-game stretch, where you only have to do so much to get there, and with the expanded playoffs, I like their chances a lot. What do you think? Disagree with me? Agree with me? How we feeling about that? Tweet me. At the JD Show 12OZ. Like me on Facebook, the JD Sports Show. Tell me how you feel about that. Do you believe in the Tigers? Do you think the Tigers can make the 2020 playoffs like I do? Because I do. I truly believe it. I did not, after the first week, I was kind of like, or after maybe the first series or so. They had that in Cincinnati, the clutch hitting. I was like, beginner's luck. But they have continued to do it game after game. And that's what I knew. This team can do it for 60 games. All they do is get 60 games. Don't have to do it for 162. Don't have to do it for a whole summer. Just get it through 60 games. With the expanded playoffs, the Tigers are going to make the playoffs after being the worst team in baseball last year. And they might get bounced early. I'm not saying that. But they are going to make the playoffs this year. I really believe the Detroit Tigers are going to make the playoffs this year. I don't know. What do you guys think? I think a lot of people probably are listening and laughing, and I get that. I understand. It's a bold prediction. It's a really bold prediction. But I'm telling you, there's something about this team, the way they clutch hit, the way the bullpen is starting to figure things out, and the starting pitch is only going to get better. This team is going to find a way to the 2020 playoffs. So, while I may not have Michigan football this fall, which is devastating, although as I've said before, I probably could use a year off. My body could use a year off of Michigan football. I may have, for the first time since 2014, postseason Detroit Tiger baseball. And this is what was, as I talked about at the beginning of the year, when I did my prediction, what makes a 60-game season so crazy because it's so unpredictable. The Oakland Athletics are 12-4, and they are running away with the American League West by 5 games over the Rangers. The Houston Astros, who I predicted to make the World Series, would not even be in the playoffs if it started right now. But the Baltimore Orioles and the Detroit Tigers would. The teams who drafted 1 and 2 over the last couple of years would both make the playoffs. 60 games, man. It's nuts. The Miami Marlins would be in the playoffs. How about the Colorado Rockies? 11-4. They have been killing it. I'll tell you what, German Marquez and Kyle Freeland, their 2 starting pitchers, have figured things out. And if they can continue to pitch well, they're only going to hit, because Nolan Arenado, who's not only the Rockies' best player, I would say probably he's one of the top 10 players in all of baseball. When you talk about everything he does, defense, hitting, hasn't really even been at his best. I don't even think he's been half at his best. Hasn't been performing like you thought. And you're 11-4. They're going to make the playoffs. And how about San Diego Padres? And how about that young man, Fernando Tatis Jr.? Seems like the dude's hitting a home run every time he comes up to the plate, and every time he leads off a game, hit another home run yesterday to extend a 3-0 lead at the time for the Padres. They're 9-7. They would not be in by the division rule, but they would be a wild card team. The Dodgers and Rockies both have a better record than them at 11-4, 11-5, but they would still be in at 9-7. I think maybe the biggest surprises to me in terms of being bad, the Phillies at 4-6. I'm shocked by that. I really thought the Phillies would be good. I had them making playoffs. Nationals at 4-7. I had them making playoffs. You know, Nationals, look, they were dirt bottom last year when they won the national or the World Series. You know, through 30, 40 games, they were one of the worst teams in baseball. I guess they want to do that again. The problem is it's only a 60-game season this year, so they got to pick things up a little bit. I would say, you know, although I thought the White Sox, I know they're 8-8. I thought the White Sox would be a little bit better. Obviously, I thought the Astros would be better at 6-9. That's bad. Angels, man, 5. They have the best player in baseball. I hate the fact that Mike Trout, the best player in baseball, one of the most fun players to watch, who I don't get to watch a lot because he's on the West Coast, but I love watching Mike Trout, is on that terrible team. I would love to see him get one good postseason run with a good team. Imagine watching Mike Trout in the World Series, how fun that would be. He's always a blast to watch. He's the best player in baseball. Don't put him on the Yankees. Dude, I would love to see Mike Trout on the Minnesota Twins. Because I think the Twins are a really good team. But if they had Mike Trout to go along with what they have, I think I would put the Twins as a favorite to win the World Series. And I think that would be fun to watch Mike Trout on the Twins. That team just blasts home runs. And that's what I'm not saying that's all Mike Trout does. I mean, Mike Trout does everything. He's the best player in baseball, but he likes to bomb them. 5 home runs in his first 6 games back. Hit a home run on his 29th birthday the other day, which, by the way, I didn't know he was already 29. I thought he was still like 24, 25 the way he plays. You would think he is. I mean, every ground ball he hits, he still runs to first base like he's got a real chance at a base hit, which is why, the dude's a first ballot Hall of Famer. Could be, I think, very well, good chance he'll be a unanimous pick in the Hall of Fame, 100%. I just gave Buck Farmer good news, and now I read that he just went on the 10-day injured list with a left groin strain. Come on. Come on, Buck. I give the Tigers props to make the playoffs. I just talk about how you figured things out, and now you go on the 10-day injured list. They've called up Bo Burrows to replace him. Man, I give the guy some credit. I finally like the bullpen. I feel good. I make this bold prediction on 12-ounce sports about Tigers making the playoffs, and Buck Farmer has to go and put himself on the injured list with a groin strain. As I teased a little bit ago about the Astros, so yesterday in the Houston Astros and Oakland Athletic game, it was the first brawl of the COVID season. Ramon Laureano got hit, and it was the second Athletics player to get hit. You could tell he was upset by getting hit, but he went to first base. And then all of a sudden, Alex Centrone the hitting coach for the Astros started barking from the dugout at Laureano, and I haven't seen the full. I haven't gotten a good angle. Some people are saying that Laureano was supposedly kind of barking his way down to first base, not at Centrone or anybody, but was kind of you could tell he was visibly upset. But Alex Centrone, the hitting coach for the Astros, starts yelling at Laureano from the dugout. The hitting coach for the Astros, yeah. No idea why. The hitting coach for the opposing team, not the pitching coach, the hitting coach. Anyways, starts yelling at Laureano at first base because the Astros dugout is next to first base, the first base side. And you could tell Laureano was just you could tell he wanted to start something. he was just, you could kind of tell he was finding a reason to go charge somebody because he was already upset after getting hit. And then Centrone, you can kind of hear him yelling at each other. I can't quite make out what they're yelling. They're yelling at each other. And Laureano, the dude throws out and it just bolts at the dugout. And like two Astro coaches stand right in front of Centrone, hitting coach, to kind of block him because Laureano was going straight for him. And next thing you know, we got a brawl. It wasn't huge, but it was a big brawl. Both benches cleared. There's a little bit of fighting between players. Laureano had to be held back. Centrone had to be held back. And MLB made it really clear that if you brawl or if you have any interaction like that, there's going to be some heavy suspensions. I have not heard anything yet about that. As far as I've been looking today, I have not seen anything on the what could be, or I should say, the impending punishments that will be coming for those two teams. Laureano obviously is going to get a big penalty. Centrone, the hitting coach, is probably going to get a big penalty. Any other player they feel like started anything inside that scuffles. But what I think is interesting about this is we are going to see really how harsh these penalties are. Because remember how Rob Manfred set a standard I talked about last week on the show by suspending Joe Kelly for 8 games? So now I'm interested to see for throwing at the Astros, and I said that was kind of him making a statement to not do it again. Well, if Major League Baseball, and they should be, is really serious about putting heavy penalties against players fighting now because of, social distancing and COVID, then I would like to see a big hefty penalty here for these guys. And I get it, right? I'm not saying that, Ramon Laureano was wrong or Centrone was wrong or whatever. But I'm kind of like, you suspended Joe Kelly 8 games for throwing at guys. Then what is the penalty for guys fighting when MLB made it very clear that fighting was very against the rules this year because of COVID-19 and social distancing. So very interested to see all that's going to happen there between suspending athletic players and Astro players. And I'm actually surprised that there hasn't been any confirmation of any sort of suspensions or fines or anything like that yet. Again, Laureano's obviously going to get something. Him and Centrone, I would imagine, will get the worst because they instigated it. I think Laureano will get by far the worst. So he actually charged Centrone. He kind of, I saw somebody last night say they had heard, and I apologize. I saw this late last night on Twitter. I forgot to look at it. And I saw that people were talking about 10 games for Laureano. I mean, that seems high, but again, if MLB's serious about really being harsh about penalties for fighting, that could be possible. I mean, again, we saw Joe Kelly get 8 for throwing at somebody. We could very well see 10 for fighting but why I bring that up is that is a 6th of the season right there. 10 games, especially now that, and look, the Athletics, as I mentioned, they're one of the top teams in baseball. And Ramon Laureano is a really good young player, outfielder. So losing anybody, a starter, for 10 games, that is a huge loss. And that's why I'm sure, Bob Melvin and everybody over there in Oakland were probably very upset. And I get it. Again, you could tell that Ramon Laureano was already upset. And my opinion, I guess I'll give you my quick opinion on it. I have no idea why Alex Centrone, a hitting coach, is barking at a player. I do not get that at all. I think that is dumb. I mean, why is the hitting coach of the opposing team making any sort of barking at a guy who got hit? That makes no sense to me. But I also feel like Ramon Laureano has to understand what that can do and the consequences, because he's now going to hurt his team. Even if he's suspended for 5 or 6 games, that's still a lot in a 60-game season. And he's a starter. So he should have known better. If you want to sit there and bark at the guy from a distance and mouth off to him, that's fine. But he knew when he charged Cintrone in the Astros dugout what he was putting himself into, and in the long run, he might have gotten other players in trouble, because if other athletics players came into that scrumble, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, they also are probably going to get in some sort of suspension. So to me, it was a little, I get it, right? Like, I understand why Ramon Laureano was frustrated, but it felt a little selfish to me, because in this situation, if it's a regular season, we're not talking about COVID, I think it's more understandable, but he has to understand in that situation, and I know it might be hard to, and the first base coach should be saying, like, hey, you got to remember, fighting is bad. Fighting, is bad. Like, Laureano should have been more conscious of what the outcome and consequences from that were going to be. So, to me, it was a little selfish, but it was also so odd and just really kind of, for lack of a better term, dumb by Siniero. Again, I just don't understand why the hitting coach is saying anything right there. He doesn't need to. There's no reason for that. I mean, you're the hitting coach. If you want to get frustrated when your guy gets hit, I totally understand that, because you are the hitting coach. But when the opposing team's batter gets hit, well, I don't understand. And that's all it's going to do is going to create animosity, especially when you don't have fans in the stands, so everything can be heard. Ramon Laureano probably heard every single word Siniero said in that dugout, because you can hear everything. I mean, the fans could hear all of it. Laureano, who is 20 feet away from Siniero, because again, the Astros dugout's right next to first base. He can hear all of that. So to me, selfish by Laureano, but also very unnecessary by Siniero, the pitching or hitting coach. He didn't need to bark at the opposing batter. Let the guy get frustrated, let him steam himself out, and you move on with the game, because now you both hurt yourself in terms of probably suspensions and fines, and you've hurt your teams, because, as I mentioned, probably other players that got in that brawl are going to get suspended and punished as well. So you kind of hurt there's a lot of backlash from that, essentially. A lot of discussed here today on the JD Sports Show. Thank you all so much for your continued support. Again, follow me over on Twitter at the JD Show 12OZ. Like me on Facebook, JD Sports Show. Again, thanks to our sponsors, the Fields Golf Course, 12 Ounce Sports, and MyBookie, for continuing to sponsor the JD Sports Show every Monday, 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern on 12 Ounce Sports and the Zingo TV app. Thank you all again for listening. Hopefully next week, we'll have some more discussions about what's going on with college football, the Big Ten, and hopefully some lighter news. So again, thank you to everybody for listening today in the JD Sports Show. We'll see you next week.